before we get started with that, we're going to make our garlic butter and sit that stuff in the refrigerator. So you've got to have 1 cup of butter or margarine, softened at room temperature, not melted. And in my case, I'm going to do 2. Let me make sure these are where I want them to be. Welcome, new members. We had a bunch of you this week. And it's always good to see that. And one of the things I said to in my member message was, it's real important because you guys come from so many different places in the country and from so many different backgrounds and so many different experiences with bread, that it's real important that you guys share with us what you know. We're not the end-all be-all here. We count on you to show us what you know, and then we ask questions of you. You're going to be a part of this group. We're going to make you a part of it, right? So, 2 sticks is a cup. I'm going to make, this is not my mise en place at its best, but I've had these sitting out since last night. So these will be fine. Go ahead and start chopping up, dicing your green onion, or if you're using scallions, that's fine. I couldn't find those, so green onions are what we're doing. And by the way, what are you guys doing with all this yeast? Nobody can find it anywhere. You guys making moonshine? You have to. Because you can't be eating that much bread. And there's no yeast on anybody's counter, not even at the chef's store. This is a mess. I'm making a mess. Now, you're not going to use all of this. So, and I know that. So, why not? I'm going to stop there. Because there's not another place I'm going to use it. And then we're going to put in some sea salt. And we're going to get this out of the way so we can start making bread. This is not my favorite part. 1 teaspoon of fine sea salt. And I'm going to do 2. There's 1. A little bit more than 2. Get your sea salt in there. Now let's get with our green onions. We want to make sure these are small enough that we can eat them and not choke on them. I'm a baker, not a chef. Boy, these smell good. I'm an onion lover. I love onions, so these smell good to me. All right. Now you can use scallions here. You can use onions. You just get creative and use whatever it is that you like to eat in this type of bread. But like I always say, follow the recipe the first time, and then after that, get creative. There's my onion. Okay, sink. All right, let's just give this a good mix. And we're going to add some garlic. I like minced garlic. Flavors there. Everything you need is right here. And I use, just a name brand. This is a Stone Mill minced garlic. And in your case, you're going to use about a teaspoon of garlic powder or the same kind of thing in minced garlic. Garlic goes a long way. If you like lots of garlic, add lots of garlic. There we go. Now you can also use a pesto here instead of this butter. Now, I said in my recipe that I was going to use mozzarella cheese, but I didn't have enough mozzarella cheese. So I'm going to do a cheddar. This is my Clorox water. Best thing for your hands if you want them to look like chicken feet. All right. Set this in your refrigerator now until we get to where we're going to need it. All the rest of this is trash. If you're new to our group and this is your first time baking with us, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about your experience with making bread. Because we're going to do all kinds of bread here. It's hard to do sourdough breads in 30 minutes or an hour, but we'll put out separate videos for that. And I have a separate video that shows you exactly how, start to finish, to do a nice, simple sourdough loaf. And you can find that on our YouTube page, and it's real simple. Just follow it. Okay, now let's get down to making the dough. If you don't have a scale, what are you waiting on? You need a scale. Go buy a scale. Okay? We'll leave it at that. Been saying it long enough. So let's start out with our flour. You're going to start out with 2.5 cups or 312 grams if you're doing a single recipe. And in my case, I'm going to use 5 cups, which is right at 624 grams of all-purpose flour. I use King Arthur because I can count on the consistency of protein. If you notice, there's no King Arthur on the shelves right now, and there's a reason for that. When you buy flour, you've got cake flour, which is not for bread. You've got flour. You got all-purpose flour, which has about 11-12% protein in it, which is what we need for making bread because that's where we get our gluten. And you have bread flour, which has between 12 and 14% protein. And that's really good for making bread with a real tight crumb, like sandwich bread with a really tight crumb. And then you've got whole wheat bread that's got 14% or more, but it doesn't form gluten as well as the white kind of red winter wheat that you find in a white all-purpose flour. And King Arthur is very, very diligent about keeping their measurements accurate, which makes you able to turn out the same kind of loaf over and over again. So if you screw it up 3 times, you know where you're screwing it up because you'll screw it up in the same place every time, or you're successful in the same place every time. All right, now granulated sugar. For me, that's going to be 6 tablespoons or 90 grams. For you, if you're doing one recipe, it's 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Here's my sugar. Now it says to make, in my recipe, I made a point to say that I want you to make 3 wells in your flour. So what you do is you make a well here, and one here, and that will allow you to keep your yeast and your salt and your sugar separated. Then you mix your yeast and your sugar together first, and then mix the salt. Then mix the salt into it. Yeast and salt don't get along. You know that. So we try to keep them separated. One of the ways we can keep them separated is in the flour. The flour is going to act like a buffer to keep these two things apart long enough for us to get started with what we're doing. All right. There's our salt, which is 1/2 teaspoon of Island sea salt and 3 tablespoons of sugar. And then we're going to add our yeast. This is an interesting measurement for yeast. Typically, recipes revolve around 7 grams of yeast because that's how they're packaged in those little sachets, and that's about 7 grams. But in this case, we're going to go a little bit higher than that. We're going to go 1 tablespoon of yeast, which means 2 for me, and let's see, make sure I'm right about that. Yep, and it's about 20 grams for me, 10 grams for you if you're doing one recipe, but if you're doubling it, it's 20. I've already got it weighed out. Here's my yeast. Now we're going to go for 180 milliliters of water here. So, I'm sorry, of milk. Let's weigh that out. Now, I'm, of course, doing a little bit more. I'm doing 360 because I'm doubling my recipe. This is why the scale comes in handy. Perfect. Stick this in the microwave for 1 minute. And then we're going to take 1 egg if you're doing a single recipe. If you're doing the double recipe, we're going to use 2. And we want to whisk these together. Not the best bowl for whisking. Now you want your milk, if you're warming it up, to proof your yeast. If you're warming this up and you're going to put your yeast in here before you just dump it into your bowl, you want to make sure that the temperature is anywhere between 100 and 120 degrees. Any more than 120 degrees, you're going to kill your yeast. Anything less than that will not activate your yeast properly. But if you're using instant yeast, which I recommend, you can just put it right in. And that's a step you just don't have to worry about. You can just rest comfortably. All right, I'm going to use this, and this is in a bowl on a stand mixer. Now, you can certainly do this by hand. This is the kind of dough that you want to do by hand if you have a choice. But I don't have the time. So if you want to, this is going to be a sticky dough. So we're going to put out enough flour, just enough flour, to get past the sticky stuff. But I'm going to start it out here in the stand mixer. Start it out on number 1. You know this guy makes a lot of noise, so I can have a private lesson with us, just on Zoom. It would be an intimate gathering where we can ask questions of each other and talk to each other. We're all on the screen at the same time. We're putting that together for you. So make sure you're commenting in the comments. Tell us what it is you're looking for. Tell us what kinds of breads you'd like to see us make. And tell us where you're from, especially if you're new. Now we're going to go up to second speed. All I really want to do here is get the flour incorporated. I don't want any flour sitting around on the bottom of the bowl. That's where you have to be careful here. 2-3 minutes on third speed after you get the flour started to be incorporated. 2-3 minutes on that. And then after that, it's onto the counter, and we'll go through what I'm talking about for those of you who are making this by hand. I'll divide it for you. I'll cut it down. You see how sticky this is? What's our rule? What's our rule with sticky dough? Wet hands. Especially on your thumb if you're using a dough scraper. See all this flour down here? You've got to make sure that's mixed into your dough. If you're mixing with a stand mixer, scrape down the sides of your bowl so that you don't end up with dough with flour stuck down there. Now, you don't have to be real strong here. You know, people are at different levels of accomplishment. They know they can handle wet dough. Some, this is their first time doing it. And the thing is dough is going to come off your hands. It's not, the plague. So I know a lot of people have a problem with sticky dough. And if you do, just wet your hands a little bit. All we want to do is get this incorporated. You see what I'm doing? I'm pushing away from myself, pulling it back, pushing away, pulling it back, making sure that the damp parts, the parts that are sticking to my hand, get some flour. Keep it all incorporated. Now, see, I'm not trying to do too much. I just want the flour incorporated, and then let's get started on a little glue. All right, that's good. See, there's not a lot of gluten development yet, but there's more than I expected. Let's do that again. This is a French kneading technique. I call it slap and fold. Now we've got a nice little ball. See that? And then now I'm going to put that in a container, cover it with some cling film, and let that proof for about an hour. Now, once it's started to proof up, when it's ready, you'll be able to tell it. I'll show you here. Now I have a bowl of this that I've already done. Woo! Let me use the same bowl. So this goes in to proof for an hour. Just get it out of our way. Use the same cling film. I'll put it in a bowl here in a second. So let's look at this. You see the strands? Those gluten strands? Look at that. See that? That's how you know it's ready. So now I'm going to punch this down. What time is it, y'all?
Ready?
All right, here's our healthy dough. This one is going back into this greased container with some cling film. You know, the best place to proof this is the reason we cover it like this is because we don't want air getting to it. We don't want the draft. The draft is what's going to dry out our dough and cause it to have a skin. That's not something we want. So we cover it with cling film, but where do you proof it? You want to proof it in an area where it's at least 80 degrees, and that's typically not your living room. So you can turn the light on in your oven and keep your oven off. Put your light on in there, and that'll keep it right about 80 degrees. Don't turn your oven on. All right. Another reason to have a scale, because I have to divide this now into 4 equal pieces. And, you know, you can eyeball it, but you're going to come out with different size pieces. 90.5 is what each of these needs to be. This is one. Now, what I'm going to do is roll it up just like I'm pre-shaping it. It's a pre-shape. You don't want this tight. You just want it nice and loose. You want it to be a ball. 290. So, here we go again. Put it all in the center. And then just a little ball. Because we're going to need those shapes later. See that? Simple. Make yourself a little ball, a little twist. Now, I don't want these to dry out either. So I've got a little bit of a damp cloth that's been burned on the stove. So now I'm going to do the same thing here. Ideally, you want these to rest for about 10 minutes. Just let them rest. So now, let's go get some parchment paper. Here's the key. This is, most of baking is technique. It's not, I'm using the same recipe you're making. The reason that your bread and someone else's bread may turn out a little bit different is mainly because of technique. So here's one. You've got a circle, and you want to pat it down with your hand first because we're trying to get a circle here. So I'm starting out with something of a circle. Nice and easy with your rolling pin. Always start with your rolling pin in the middle of your dough. Work your way out. If your dough's fighting you and trying to pull back, leave it alone. Let it rest for a few minutes. If your dough's being bad, put it in timeout. So So this is fighting a little bit, and I'm not going to get 10 inches unless I get a little bit more forceful here. What I like to do is, if I can get it big enough, is I put a 10-inch plate here and just draw a circle around it so I can cut off what I don't use. But if you're not in that place, just get it round, and we'll go from here. Now I'm going to take the edge. Ooh. Oh my. Let's just start with that. Out of the refrigerator. Now, if you're like me, your tendency is going to be to put a lot of this on here, to smear it on here. But that's not what you want to do. Take your time, put a little bit on, put another layer, a little bit on, and we'll go from there. Now remember, this part can be done with pesto. It can be done with, tomato sauce. You can make little pizzas with it. And I'm having to fight this dough because I'm not giving it a chance to rest. And you want to leave yourself a little bit of an edge to work with. I'm going to use cheddar. You can use mozzarella, ricotta, Parmesan, whatever floats your boat. And not a lot. You don't want this to turn into, something other than it's supposed to be. This is not, just a little. It'll come out better. Flatten it out. Put the yeast back into contact with its food source. And you notice I'm not using a lot of flour. Probably should be using a little more than I am, but you don't have to. The thing about a sticky dough is people want to add flour to it so they can handle it better. But if you add flour to your dough is going to happily suck it up. And what you're going to end up with is a heavy, dense piece of bread. See that? Now, number 2. This could be a cinnamon, brown sugar mixture. but I think we've had enough cinnamon this month. I know my family thinks I have. Just a little. Don't get carried away with this cheese. You want to see how this behaves when you make it. So the next time you make it, you can say, okay, I'll add a bunch more cheese. But this time around, let's just be careful. Conserve. All right? 2 more. Is bread all the way around the world. It's flour, water, salt, and yeast. If you think about it, on their own, flour, water, salt, and yeast cannot sustain life. But combined under the watchful eye of the baker, they become the very staff of life. So get to know what your dough feels like and what your dough is telling you. My dough is telling me here that it doesn't need to rest anymore because it's not pulling back from it. So that's communication. It's just how, do I ever learn to interpret it? And that's what I'm trying to do here. That's the part about the science of baking that I enjoy the most. See, that fits right over there nicely. Last little bit. The top, we're not going to put any on top. That's almost done. See what it's doing? You can see that initially it's resisting, pulling back a little, but have a firm hand. Almost. And this is also why I like to use a scale, because these individual portions turn out, really similar to each other. And the thing is if you have one that's extremely small, then what do you do? Stretch this over and go down and seal the edges. That's just so it's easier to handle in a minute. You can take a cookie cutter or something else that is the right size for you. It's a little bit big. And I don't have my cookie cutter, so I'm going to use the lid of this jar. Find the middle and just give yourself a little indentation, something to work with so you know where that boundary is. Now we're going to cut this into 16 pieces, but we're going to do it in an orderly fashion. We're going to start here and cut just up to that line. Cut all the way through the layers. Come back. Four. 5. Now we're going to cut these in half. I need my lazy Susan. See, this isn't hard, is it? All right, the last part. We're going to cut them in half again. One last time. All nice and even. If you have a little trouble with this sticking to your blade or your knife, whatever you're using, pull out a little flour. All right, here we go. Now's the fun part, okay? Can you see this? We're having some trouble with the Wi-Fi. We're trying to fix everything, but we're getting there. So make sure these edges are sealed. Come down and get the last one on the bottom. Take 2 and lift up and twist once, twist twice, and it's almost a third twist, and that's where you're going to seal it. Got me? Do it again. Once, twice, and then pull these edges together. So it's really 3. And seal that. One, 2, and seal. One, 2, seal. Now, you make this for a little gathering at the pool or a dinner party, and people are going to be impressed with it. And they're going to eat it. That's the most important part. Seal those edges. Now, as this begins to prove, you're going to notice that these edges may come apart a little bit. It's fine. It's growing, it's alive. So that's when you just go back and tighten things up. Sticking a little on the bottom, so just make sure it's coming off. 1, 2, and seal. Boys and girls, that is basically your star bread. We're going to cover this with some cling film, and I'm going to brush it with some egg wash just before I put it in the oven. So you just want to use a little bit of egg, just use one egg, and a tablespoon of water, tablespoon of milk, just before it goes in the oven. This will take about an hour to prove. Okay. Last night when I had nothing better to do. Now this is going to prove for about an hour and a half. And then you're going to, right now is when you want to preheat your oven to 390 degrees Fahrenheit, 200 degrees Celsius. I think it's 200 degrees Celsius. So the family that I sometimes contribute to has kids and they love sweet breads. So I made this one for them last night. I'll give this to them today. And this is Nutella. So this is another star bread, but it's a sweeter version. It's got Nutella in it, and with some sprinkles on it for the little girl that lives there. And this is the Savory buck. This is good. This is going to be really good here. So that's how you do it, fellas. You're going to bake this in a 390 degree oven for, now this sounds quick, but you know what? At 15 minutes, you're going to be finished with this. If it goes beyond that, don't let it go beyond that by more than 5 minutes. So you've got your instant read thermometer. Way to check this is done is that the internal temperature is between 197 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and it sounds hollow on the bottom when you tap it. If you think it's browning up too quickly, then tint it with a piece of aluminum foil and put the shiny side up and you're done. Okay, any questions you have for me, put them in the bottom. I'll get to them sometime today and tomorrow. And thank you so much for being a part of this group. This group is a big deal to a lot of people, and it certainly does mean a lot to me. So if you can't pronounce every ingredient in your bread, then perhaps it's not bread, but something else altogether. Have a good week, everybody. I'm out. Rachel, you ready to do some math for me?
Yeah.
What is 1162 divided by 4?
1162 divided by 4. 299.